Alright, you ready to watch some anime?
Yeah, What?
What did you do?
I sneezed. I don't know. What?
Change it back!
Are we? I can't. I sneezed already. I'm not gonna.
Takina Inoue is a seemingly average schoolgirl, but she has a big secret. She works for a covert organization of schoolgirl assassins to maintain Japan's peaceful facade. But after an act of insubordination, she finds herself transferred to a coffee shop? Now with the help of her new partner Chisato, Takina must find herself a new purpose and a new lease on life. Can love truly bloom on the battlefield? Gear up for a nail-biting adventure and uncover the truth for yourself in Lycoris Recoil.
Well, Mumi, are you ready to talk about Hideo Kojima's favorite anime?
Spy Family? Zone of the Enders?
No, Lycoris Recoil, damn it.
Oh. I think Hideo Kojima's been a little bit too much into anime lately.
I can see why. This is one of my favorite anime of the year.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, obviously this is like an anime original, so...
Yeah, well, because no one, working on this, we're, familiar with their work of. I guess the director did, character designs for Sword Art Online, but that's basically it. But it's not like either of us are huge Sword Art Online fans.
No.
So we kind of just, picked this up going in blind.
Going into it, right, it kind of was just reminded of, Assault Lily, where I'm just kind of okay, it's gonna be another, girls with guns shit, okay.
Okay.
But this, I have not really watched, a lot of girls with guns kind of anime, right? That was that big boom in the 2000s.
Yeah,
with Gunslinger Girl, El Hazard, Noir. I would say this is, despite this kind of being more in line with, a true gun girl show, it felt more like a Sabajibu without actually being, a comedy.
Yeah. There's a good balance here that's going on.
Yeah.
Because on one end, you have, the, fun, slice of life, cute girl stuff. There are a lot of episodes here that have nothing to do with, we gotta go take out this person, or it's a protection job. No, one of these episodes is literally just about buying underwear, and it's delightful.
One's just going on a date to an aquarium, acting like a fish.
Yeah, and it's great. And then you have the more serious plot, the political themes, and everything going on with that.
Yeah, it would not work if it was a dark show.
No, but that was the original plan.
Yeah.
The original creator, Asaora, he's a light novel author, was basically just picked up by A1 Pictures because I guess the president and one of the producers there were fans of his work. And we're like, hey, we want you to make an original anime. Give us a concept. So he gave him this darker girls with guns thing. And then they attached Shingo Arachi to be the director. And he sort of lightened things up a bit.
Yeah. I feel like this would have been really forgettable if it were really dark.
Yeah.
We've had so many just dark, seemingly cute girl kind of shows in the last 10 years in the wake of Madoka Magica.
Yeah, it's kind of overdone at this point. We compared it a bit to Psycho-Pass when watching it. And if it was something like that, I would not enjoy it. But this has that nice balance, and that kind of is reflected in Chisato and Takina's sort of dynamic as well, because Takina at the start is a very serious kurere type character. She has no qualms with killing people and takes everything very seriously and by the books. And Chisato is the polar opposite of that.
Yeah.
She will go to great lengths to avoid killing people, to the point she's bandaging people up who have been shot. She uses these hilarious non-lethal bullets that explode into red dust that looks like blood, but it's not, and the people aren't physically harmed or whatever, although I'd imagine, given what the action is it's breaking a couple ribs.
Yeah. Well, especially some of the scenes where it shows she gets real close. And there's impact shit coming from their back.
Yeah, it's whoa, okay, oh, they're fine, all right. I mean, to be fair, in the first episode, she shoots through a car door with them. So it's the logic here doesn't really matter.
No.
If this was a more serious show, logic, I think, would matter a bit more, but because it takes like these like serious topics and sort of plays with them in a more upbeat manner, it gets more leeway that way.
Yeah. It's not inviting that scrutiny.
So yeah, it has that really nice balance to it. And while watching it, we're just like, at the end of every episode, okay, it hasn't fucked up yet, but it could in the next episode, even up to the last episode.
Yeah, it felt like it was like teetering on the edge the whole time.
And I think that makes it a more exciting thing to watch. To see it pay off, to see it work out, is more satisfying, I'd say, than a show that you just know is going to be like rock solid.
It definitely was like an interesting trapeze act, which I would not have expected from Adachi, which this is his first directorial work.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing.
From what you kind of see, like Adachi seems like he's a pretty sociable guy, right?
Yeah.
Which I think that kind of like influenced his direction on this. Mainly in like the voice acting. It kind of reminds me a little bit like the original Gundam. So, okay, hold on.
Go on.
When I watched that, like I remember I was really kind of like impressed by the voice acting. Because it's not like playing into like the overly cartoony acting that you see in a lot of like voice acting where they kind of feel like they had to overly emote to get that emotion through just with their voice.
Sure.
It felt very natural.
Okay.
This kind of felt like that in a way. It feels very different from a lot of anime. You have characters that are kind of speaking like in the background. They don't have like this weird like verbal chanbara thing where one person's talking so everyone else immediately had to stop talking for one person to say what they're saying.
Yeah.
Like you kind of have this chaotic, natural, organic kind of feel where characters are like commenting on what they just were told or, you know, what they're doing in the background, and it feels very natural. The show manages like this balance of like the slow-paced slice of life stuff. It kind of plays into dualities, right?
Yeah.
It manages the slow-paced slice of life stuff alongside like the well kind of choreographed, fast-paced action.
Yeah.
And unlike, you know, the other Secret Agent show with wholesome moments juxtaposed with the action from this year, it doesn't really present the characters as being all that serious in the firefights. It still kind of maintains that levity of like slice of life comedy, even though they're like trying to avoid being shot at with an Uzi, like behind a backpack.
Yeah. Well, Chisato basically being able to, you know, dodge bullets at point blank like she's fucking Kirito sort of takes off some pressure, and it's just like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, she can walk right through direct fire. There's no tension here.
Yeah.
And if there's no tension, you just make it fun.
But even despite that, like the animation and like choreography of this is like oftentimes really good.
Yeah, there's some really great sequences.
But even like the level of detail they put into like the gunplay, they brought on what's his name, Kenji Sawada. I guess he's basically like the industry's kind of gun expert at this point.
Okay.
Just to make sure that, you know, the guns kind of all feel accurate. And it's interesting because it's even to the point where like they even bring into play like the concussive properties of like gunfire. And, you know, it's hardly ever even acknowledged in media.
Yeah. The core of the show is the relationship between Takena and Chisato. And, you know, you say, like, in, like, screenwriting, you make two characters that are opposites and you put them together. And that sort of gives you, like, instant chemistry. And that's definitely, like, the case here, I'd say, where Takena and Chisato are very different characters. And seeing them get along and the way they handle not only just, like, you know, like, oh, we gotta do, like, an escort mission, but, like, the way they handle, like, running, like, the cafe itself is a lot of fun to see.
They use that, like, dynamic of, like, polar opposites really well.
Yes.
Takena is very logical, calculating, and business-minded, where Chisato is more like personable.
Yeah.
Which I guess we should address the elephant in the room with this show.
The big controversy?
Are Takena and Chisato gay?
This is the question that everyone needs to be asking in these troubled times of ours.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Because, you know, it's not like in the show it is, you know, explicitly confirmed. But
they're very much gay-coded.
Yeah. Well, it's something that you see a lot in anime where, you know, you have these characters that act friendly to one another. A fun example is like a Reinhardt and Kirk Ice in Legend of the Galactic Heroes, where They're technically not gay characters, they're both straight, but the way they behave with one another really activates those almonds, you know what I mean?
What, are you saying you don't kiss your homies goodnight?
Exactly. Well, it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, you know what, normalize picking up your friends and spinning them around like that.
You're looking very submissive and breedable today.
It's one of those things where if you don't think they are, if that's not your headcanon, fair enough. If they are, if that's what you want, go ahead. I think that's, entirely valid. At the end of the day, I think, whether or not these characters are romantically interested in one another is ultimately up to, like, the viewer and either reading, whether they're gay or not, is totally fine.
Death of the author, goddammit.
That being said, Chisato and Takina are 100% gay. Don't fucking at me.
Oh, people will at you on Twitter. You got all those people that are harassing the writers on Twitter because they don't think that they're gay enough.
Yeah.
Takina is presented as, like you said, this real stoic, kudere kind of unmoving character, but she ends up being the, like, dynamic character of the two.
Yeah.
Whereas Chisato, she's presented as, like, this really emotional and warm and caring character, but she's
Genki girl.
Yeah, but she's the static one.
Yeah.
Like, she's not changing. And so, like, you have this kind of interesting, like, play of, like, characters here, where Takina is learning from Chisato, and it's kind of presented like that's what she should be aiming to be. But once you kind of get a little deeper into it, they kind of have, like, an interesting kind of play on that.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you bring up Shingo Arashi being more of, like, a sociable guy, because from what I understand, Chisato as a character, this very bubbly, outgoing girl, that kind of really came to be through his involvement. Originally, I think Asato's plans were just to have her be this sort of, like, Gyaru-type character. And then, when Arashi gets involved, he sort of, makes some changes and makes her this more extroverted type. Chisato doesn't necessarily change, but she is challenged at points in the story.
If that were my one complaint, I felt like her ideals weren't challenged a whole lot.
That's fair.
On, like, a personal level, right? Because she's one of these characters that's like a Vash,
yeah,
or Emi Ashiro from Fate Stay Night. Those kind of characters, I have, like, a weird fascination with seeing, like, their ideals really, like, challenged, like, in this weird deranged...
Yeah, like, their optimistic outlook on the world challenged.
Overly idealistic, I would say.
Yeah.
Compared to, like, Vash, he is, like, to the point where he's just taking on all this, like, trauma to himself just to protect the lives of everyone else. Chisato is very much in that same vein, but they don't really go as far as, like, they do in a Fate Stay Night or a Trigun in challenging those ideals.
Yeah.
But I'll say they don't really need to, right? Like, this show is not this grim, dark, like, challenge of ideals.
This was not written by Gano Robuchi.
No. It's done well enough that it creates a tension.
Well, again, there's that balance, where it goes, like, just far enough.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, go overboard. It doesn't go off the edge. It gives you just enough to think about without, like, really hitting you over the head with it like a psychopath.
Yeah, it's weird because it comes back around where it almost becomes, like, refreshing that they didn't do that.
Yeah.
I would rather them not do it than to see it done for the umpteenth time and just be like, okay.
It kind of harkens back to something like Wonder Egg or whatever, where you have, like, those darker elements and they constantly tease them. But Wonder Egg eventually does go off that edge, where this never does. This has restraint.
Yeah. It's almost more refreshing that she doesn't change.
Yeah.
She's not like, oh, maybe I should kill him.
Yeah.
Like, it's very clearly like, well, that's the way it's gotta be,
Yeah, if you want something like that, I don't know, watch Batman.
Yeah.
Speaking of Batman, we have neglected to mention a really good character in it as well, the Joker.
I'm the Joker, baby.
Yeah.
Majima.
Yeah, Majima. He's very much like the ideological, like, opposite of Chisato, right?
Yeah.
Where Takina's just kind of the opposite in characterization. Majima's the complete opposite as far as, like, ideological leanings.
Yeah, but as we learn in the show, they're more alike than they'd like to admit.
Yeah, and that's kind of the cool thing about it to me.
Mm-hmm.
When they first introduced Majima, right, like, it's just like, oh, okay, this is like a minor, like, one-off villain.
I kind of thought of, like, Makishima from Psycho-Pass.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he does have that kind of Makishima vibe.
Yeah, especially, like, as he, like, because he's not a minor character. He is the villain of the show, more or less.
But he felt like a minor character, right? Because, like...
He did. He felt like a jobber.
In their first encounter, he doesn't feel that exceptional. You're just like, okay, well, he's not anything compared to Chisato fucking Terminator over here. Like,
yeah.
like, he's not going to be of any kind of consequence. And then he ends up kind of sticking around, and you're like, okay, where are you going with this?
Where are we
You're
going
gonna
with
fall
this?
off the edge here. Like,
Oh no.
but then like, there's like this really interesting scene where he's like in her apartment, and they just start talking about movies.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and they're getting along, and it's like, okay, this was different.
yeah, he kind of embodies Makishima in the sense of like how he rebels against the system.
Yeah.
But he's very much just the Joker, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
he's that kind of anarchist, like,
Well, he says that, like, the side that he's on is, you know, he's just gonna side with, like, whoever he thinks is the weakest, whoever needs it the most. And that just leads him, by happenstance, to working against the DA. But in another world, in another time, he'd be working with them.
it's a little bit weak in a way because he's presented as like a villain, and then they kind of tack on like, oh no, he's actually like just kind of like a hero kind of thing. But that's not really.
It would be worse if the DA system, because the setting of the show is that anyone trying to commit any sort of like horrible, violent act is assassinated before they can do it, and that is how Japan sort of maintains this peace.
Assassinated by schoolgirls
Yes.
that were trained from a young age to murder people.
You hear that premise and you're like, okay, well, this is going to get very dark, and it doesn't. But the setting is still very authoritarian, bordering on dystopian, and that comes across without it having to be brooding and dark. But if it wasn't like that, that would make a character like Majima less interesting.
He'd be less sympathetic.
Because he's kind of right.
Yeah, he kind of has a point.
But, you know, it's not rubbing your nose in it.
That kind of like level of detail is, you know, present in their characters again. You know, Chisato in the show, she's got like the superhuman ability of sight, where Majima, he's been given super hearing or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that kind of acts as the opposite to Chisato, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's kind of playing into like, even though the DA system is, you know, keeping society in the dark, like he's still able to like hear these things in a way.
But then you also have, you know, Mizuki, who is like a woman in her 30s trying to find like someone to marry. You have Kurumi, who is the lolly hacker character.
Also potentially a woman in her 30s. It was kind of like an aside in the show. They're like, oh, Walnut has made many enemies over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Either the implication is Kurumi's actually like some 40-year-old that looks like a 2-year-old, or she like inherited this mantle from...
Inherited it.
Yeah.
Yeah, or yeah, just like somehow like, I don't know, her reputation precedes her literally. And then you have a
Oh my god.
who's also a great character.
Oh. That's kind of the appeal of the show, right? Is seeing this butterfly effect of positivity kind of in action.
Yeah.
Where an inciting kind of incident happens that saves Chisato's life and very much like changes her worldview, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of the circumstances that catalyst kind of happened, that positivity in Chisato's life echoes out and like spreads.
Yeah, well, you have a point in the show where, you know, they're thinking about closing down the cafe, and all these people are stopping by and like, I heard you're closing down. What's going on? I need this in my life. You don't understand. All these people are concerned and deeply care about what's going on in these characters' lives.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just sort of shows the sort of, ripple effects of positivity. Well, you think about it in terms of, like, I guess, you know, the whole, like, DA killing people before they can commit these horrible atrocities. And you compare that to just sort of like, I don't know, have you tried just being nice? The show ended up being kind of weirdly topical. I want to say, like, the week, like, the first episode aired, Shinzo Abe was fucking gunned down in the street by a guy with a hand cannon.
Yeah.
And you think about that, and you think about the fact that, you know, even in the real world, Japan has this, you know, image as being a very peaceful country.
It's really interesting that you bring that up, because, like, even in the real world, Japan's seen as a safe place, but it's often criticized for that being kind of a facade.
Yeah, or it's upheld with, you know, very malicious policing and prosecution practices.
Right. it's still very much a safe place.
Yeah.
But a lot of the statistics are skewed because
things can go unreported or just misreported or are swept under the rug.
Obviously, we're not like the experts to get into.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing to kind of bring up when you're talking about this show, which is criticizing that kind of way of governance.
Yeah, it's satirical in a sense. You got to do some horrible stuff in order to maintain this sort of outward appearance of peace.
You got to traumatize orphans.
Yeah. Although they're not really traumatized. The show doesn't like go into like, oh yes, it's exploited.
Yeah, just wait for Lycoris Recoil 2, where they all have to go to therapy.
In many ways, I think the show shows a level of maturity in just not having to say those things, because it's just like, yeah, we understand as audience members that this is fucked up. We don't need it spelled out to us like we're 5. But I guess, to get into spoilers, towards the end, Majima's big plot is that the whole show is like, okay, someone smuggled like 1,000 guns into the country and we don't know where they're at.
Speaking of that, did you forget about that? Like halfway through the show?
No, because they kept bringing it up every episode.
True. They would bring it up, but I feel like I was just so like invested in like this relationship with Takina.
Everything else?
Yeah, everything else. Like,
yeah,
I'm just like...
it's kind of an afterthought, but when it finally does come up, Majima's big plan is to make these guns available to the broader just Japanese public. Japan is a country where, they have very strict gun laws. So to have then like, oh, guns are just now made available in a political climate where a former prime minister was just assassinated with a gun some guy made at home is bizarre, and it's totally unintentional, of course.
But it's like
it's one of those weird
life imitating art.
Yeah, just a sort of strange alignment.
It makes me wonder like what they're thinking about with that kind of like theming, because it's like we're on like that kind of horizon where 3D printed guns are kind of becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And it feels like 3D printing is kind of a big thing in Japan, obviously for like anime figures and stuff like that. So it's like, is it kind of like predicting something?
Yeah, and it's not doing this, and it's not like, like no character is like looking into the camera and telling you this is what it's about. We're kind of like speculating here.
Right.
Because it's just interesting.
Yeah, it's more just wondering what the mindset is, like if they're kind of aware of that, or if it's just like something they stumbled onto. But really, it's not really about any kind of commentary.
No.
It's ultimately
there's definitely a political aspect, but there's a lot to enjoy outside of that.
Right. Ultimately, I think the story... it's a story of choice.
Yeah.
Life isn't the hand that you're dealt, necessarily. It's just kind of what you choose to make of it. Takina's kicked out of the DA and thinks that her place in the world is just gone. He kind of harkens back to the whole finding your place in life once you lose it kind of thing we mentioned in our previous video.
Or I guess since, we're in spoilers, Chisato, when her heart is like, gonna stop working soon, everyone else is like sad and like, worried about her, but she just faces it and she's just, maintains that optimistic outlook.
Yeah, it's very much like what you make of it.
Yeah.
How hard you can kind of get hit and get back up, that whole kind of thing. Will you blindly follow the authority of others and hope they kind of know what's best for you, or will you kind of take that responsibility onto yourself?
Yeah, well, because it's like, Shinji, the character at the Allen Institute, he wants Chisato to, be like this great assassin.
Yeah.
But Chisato ultimately rejects that path laid out for her and, forges her own.
Obviously, she's got a great propensity for murdering people.
Yes.
Essentially. But despite that, she doesn't go along with the path that's being laid out for her. The obvious path is like, yeah, just go and lean into what your talent is. Just go kill people.
Yeah.
She kind of takes the harder path and uses that talent that she has to take the more difficult road.
Yeah.
Because, like, obviously, the average person, or even, like, in the show, the average Lycoris isn't able to go down that same path that Chisato's on. Like, even Takina, like, as she's working with Chisato, you kind of see this evolution in her character where she goes from just using guns to she starts using the rope gun things where she binds people instead.
Restraining people, yeah.
Yeah. But not everybody can do what Chisato does, because Chisato is kind of a special case.
Yeah.
So she's able to use that to her advantage to be able to make those difficult decisions and kind of be that paragon for those like Takina to look to and strive for. And it's kind of going back to that ripple effect again. she's able to positively influence the world around her in these like subtle ways that are, well, she might not be saving the world in this grand way. She's acting as like the sun, essentially, like smaller communities, and is able to have a positive effect in that sense.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's kind of what the show is trying to get across, right? Like, it presents all these dualities to get across that not everything has to be grim and super serious. Like, you can have your cake and eat it too, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you can have these serious topics, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to characterize everything about the show or the characters or the story.
Right. And, like, those shows, like, that are dark, it's not that they're inherently worse.
Yeah, some of my favorite anime are like that.
Yeah. But it is refreshing to see a show just kind of unapologetically be optimistic.
Yeah.
Even though they're shooting people. So yeah, with that in mind, do you recommend Lycoris Recoil?
Yeah, 100%. It's one of my favorite anime of the year thus far.
Yeah, me too.
And which I feel like I keep saying with everything we review, but I mean it this time. I'm not a reviewer hack. This is just a good year.
Yeah, just wait until a couple months where we start talking about Mob Psycho and Chainsaw Man. And
Oh god, I wish Chisato would just shoot me. Oh, but then I'm not gonna die. Fuck.
That's so fucking stupid.